for two. Kickers are extra, I give them the boot. Ooh, going for two. Sit back, relax while I grab me a brew. Ooh, now I'm reclining while putting my time and I'm ready to go. My spine is aligning and much my lineups, my bank account grow. I am so rich, but knowledge is all that I'm leaving it with. Ooh, listen to this. Multiple options, how far can I get? Ooh, DFS Dynasty redraft tonight, I'm not finishing last. I'm finishing past any and all, I am looking to last. What else? This spot is popping and I am so locked in and only opening the door when it is opportunity knocking. And all of these spots keep on talking and talking. So what are we talking? What kind of alignment? And running it deep, even players forgotten or came from the bottom or hitting that top. And this spot is popping, yeah, this spot is popping. And woo! This is the armchair, yeah. Put up your arms, yeah. Sound the alarm, yeah, yeah, yeah. Woo!
What is going on, guys, and welcome to the Dynasty League of Extraordinary Gentlemen podcast, Personal League podcast. I am your host, of course, Jeff Lambert, and you can follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. Before we get into what a Personal League podcast is, let me first introduce my two co-hosts tonight. First up, we got Mr. Shane Barrett. He is the host of the Polly's Playoff Charity Leagues and a contributor to RotoHeat.com. And you can follow him on Twitter at FFShaneB. What's up, Shane?
What's up? I am so happy to be back on Personal League Podcasts. I love these. I thank you for letting me stay on them, and I'm ready to talk some shit.
That's what, absolutely, man. We love that. We love to have you on. I know you formerly of going for two, but once you're going for two, you're going for two for life.
Always.
Next up, we have Mr. Kyle Senra. Of course, he is a writer and ranker at GoingFor2.com. He is also host of the 2-Point Conversion and the Press Coverage podcast on Going for Two Live. And you can follow him on Twitter at Senra Says. What's up, Kyle?
Hey, first PLP of the year. Really does feel extraordinary, especially to have so many great leagues like this one returning every year.
Absolutely.
So we look forward to this. This should be fun today.
Did this league last year, and the guys were talking in the chat, on our rankings for last year, and how we the four bottom teams that we ranked ended up being the four top teams in the league last year. So, but as we talked about, as always, we usually rank them in order of what we want to take them over. And me personally, I like taking over teams that aren't exactly in the best position to win right away. I like being able to rebuild them. So that is that. All right. So what is a Personal League podcast? For those that are watching that are not in this league or have never done a Personal League podcast, it is a 1 hour-ish. I always say ish because when you have Kyle on the show, it might go 2 hours, it might go 2.5 hours.
Shane.
But we guarantee it to be at least an hour dedicated entirely to your league. So I've given the rosters to these two gentlemen. They have ranked them from 10 to 1. In the order that they would want to take them over. So it's not worst to first. It's more like I'm looking at this roster and I like the way this team is built. I would like to take this team over if I was to take it as an orphan. So that's how we rank them, and we create a consensus ranking based on that, which we will count down tonight from 10 to 1. And when we get to those teams, I've assigned each of these guys 5 teams each. They will break down strengths, weaknesses. They'll go down through each positional group and talk about your team. Give you some advice, some trade advice you might want to, take up, or even some draft advice, because we are less than 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. And of course, this is a Dynasty League, so these guys got some draft picks that they can't wait to get some rookies on their team. But if you're listening and you're not in the league and you wanted to get one of these PLPs, you just visit goingfor2.com/PLP. It's basically, if you're in a 12-man league, it's like $8.50 a person. They're super cheap. They're a lot of fun. The guys are already in the chat talking. So, again, that website is goingfor2.com/PLP. And let's go ahead and get into team number 10.
Number 10.
Number 10 team ranked as high as 9 and as low as 10. And it is Sick Puppy. And Shane, you had some choice words for this team before the show. So let's hear it. Let's hear it here.
I'm just ripping the Band-Aid off. Holy fuck. This team is old. This team is really old. And outside of Justin Herbert, your QB room sucks. O'Connell and Geno, in my opinion, will likely both be replaced at some point this upcoming season. Carr hasn't been able to stay healthy in New Orleans. And even if he does, New Orleans, to me, is a sneaky spot to draft a quarterback. Carr also has limited weapons. Your running back room is great if the year's 2021, which is real bad since Algier, White, Pierce, and Pacheco, and Tyjae Spears, I forgot him in my notes, weren't even in the league. Your wide receivers are your lone bright spot, but they're still old as fuck. You need to get younger and get younger fast if you can. Let me go. Oh, and you don't have draft picks, so like you're really screwed. You do have Jordan Addison, who's a nice, bright, young spot, and Amon-Ra, and then Devontae. But then you've still got Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas, and Tyreek Hill. Trade Tyreek. Go find a contender in this league and trade Tyreek because I don't think you are one. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got.
And well, to be fair, because I don't know how hard you guys found to rank, but I found it quite difficult to rank. And I feel like it was the case last year too. This league, top to bottom, isn't really that far stretched away.
Yeah.
At that point, most people may think that they are contenders. So Hill might have value. Like there might be some people that might not want to trade for a 30-year-old receiver. But you take those people out, there's still probably enough managers willing to at least accept the offer. Maybe you won't get a massive haul for him, but to Shane's point, yeah, you need to get younger somewhere. He's probably the one older piece that does still carry value, so it'd be a good trade.
I mean,
that doesn't have to be before the NFL draft, because to be honest, there's I think some players that they should be more pressingly trying to sell before the NFL draft, because that's where those specific players might lose value at the draft. I don't think Hill's losing any value at this point. If the Dolphins draft another receiver, the narrative is still going to be Hill's still going to be the guy until he retires. It's just how soon that's coming is really what's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to your point, Shane and Kyle, about the rankings being pretty close, even from 10 to 1. Like, looking at this roster from a 1-year perspective, if we weren't considering this to be Dynasty, this is actually a solid roster. I mean, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Jacobs has got a new home that we think is going to be better for him. Keenan Allen, new location, but I still think he's a solid player. You got Justin Herbert. You had the stack. Unfortunately, Keenan Allen's no longer there, so you lost that stack. But all in all, I mean, it's a pretty solid roster. It's just the dynasty part of it, right? I mean, Kelsey's already been rumored that he might retire. Tyreek Hill has come out publicly and said that after his contract was over in Miami, he's going to retire. Will that actually happen? I don't know, but he's getting towards the end. Keenan Allen, obviously, he's now changed teams. He's getting older in the tooth. So where you might be good this year, the bottom's going to fall out sooner than later.
Quick.
And you need to make some moves in order to secure that. Like I've always been a, sell early, be a year early instead of a year late on players. And maybe Tyreek Hill is that guy where you're moving him now before if he retires. I don't think he actually will. I don't think he falls off the cliff either, but get him while he's got peak value right now and try to move him, get some draft picks, maybe tier down a receiver and get some draft picks, that way as well. What are your thoughts, Kyle, on this team?
I think the scary part is the bottom could fall out because some of the younger players might also lose value. So a couple of running backs. I don't know if I consider Devin Singletary a younger running back. He's already onto his third team.
He's like in the middle.
But I think Zamir White might hold a lot of value right now. Looks like he's the lead back for the Raiders. To be fair, this running back class, to me, isn't strong enough to think that he'll be replaced. But even just the perception of if they draft someone in the third round, I think it'll hurt Zamir White's value. So you could still ride him out for production. He's still a running back on a rookie contract. And to Shane's point, if you want to get younger, he is, in theory, the type of player you'd want. But I wonder, can you maximize his value now? And the other younger player to that is Quentin Johnston. What if the Chargers draft a wide receiver 5th overall? I think that
they
really
should.
Yeah.
They
I
absolutely should, because Quentin Johnston is not it.
Because I think it's a clear need. Because I mean, to me, I wouldn't even call Quentin Johnston our wide receiver 1 on the Chargers. I'll go with the Canadian bias and say it's Josh Palmer. But even that's not overly inspiring as a wide receiver 1. It seems like he'd be best at best as a wide receiver 2. So yeah, I think it's inevitable they draft someone. But until they do, Quentin Johnston might still hold some value. Not what you were getting for him last year. His poor rookie season has definitely made him drop. But he could continue to drop even further. So it might be viewed as a sell low. But 2 months from now, you might consider it a sell high based on if you hold him going into the season, what he'll be worth.
Yep, 100% agree. And I agree with you that I think at 5, the Chargers should go with a receiver Which really, I think, if you look at the way the draft has fallen so far, barring any trades, at worst they could get Malik Neighbors. At best, they get Marvin Harrison Jr. If the Cardinals were to trade back, it's suspected that the Vikings might want to go up and get a quarterback. If the Vikings move up to 4 and 4 quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4, then the Chargers basically have their pick of receivers right there at that point. So
Now, they could also be the team that trades, like the Vikings trade up with the Chargers instead too.
Yeah.
Yep,
But
yep,
they might still be able to
absolutely.
land a decent receiver if it's not Harrison or Neighbors.
Yep. I think even at worst, it could be Roma Dunze, who could be a little bit further back if they do trade back. So yeah, absolutely, I think that they're going to go receiver at some point, even if they wait to the second round and get because this receiver class is so deep.
Deep.
Even a second class or second round receiver could end up replacing Quentin Johnson after his poor rookie season. So I agree 100%. All right, let's get to team number 9.
Number 9.
Number 9 team ranked as high as 8 and as low as 9. It is W Mancino. And Kyle, this is your team. Take it away.
Well, I mean, All About TDs already agrees with us saying the team is trash. It's so old. So I think we're already better reviews than last year in terms of our work. We'll see if it holds true and we're just as unsuccessful as we were last year predicting this league. Yeah, W Mancino. I'm actually going to pull up Jason Miller's question. Our draft pick's going to be debated as well. And I think that definitely, to me, weighed heavy. And I guess I was the highest on Sick Puppy at 9 as the second worst team. And yeah, I think so. I had such a hard time ranking that I actually went and did it twice. I did an initial ranking, and then without looking at it, I went and I just kind of shuffled the teams up, redid the rankings again. I felt like the second time I weighed draft capital maybe slightly more. I think that was a team that was still pretty bottom 2, no matter which way I ranked them. But all to say that, yeah, that's how tough it was for me, because I felt like after my first ranking, I wasn't satisfied. So I kind of did the rankings twice and basically took a composite ranking of where I had those teams throughout and then made that my final ranking. So I'm not even sure I'm super happy. I'm looking even back at it now at what you guys ranked. It's like, okay, maybe there were some mistakes here or there. I guess W Mancino was a pretty consensus, though. Two of us at 8. Jeff, you had him at 9. So I think we were all kind of in agreement here. This also feels like a team, especially at wide receiver, that's very old. Devontae Adams, Curtis Samuel, Debo Samuel's probably the young stud on this team, and even then he's now what? Jeff, you're the 49ers fan. Is he 27, 28?
28, I believe. This will be a age 28 season. I don't know if he's 28 yet, but he will be 28 this year.
Now, they're pretty
Shit, I'm
strong
getting
at every other position, but it just feels, and production-wise, this is a really strong receiver group that should produce. I also mentioned Cortland Sutton, the Broncos' #1 receiver. But it does feel like there's not as much dynasty value in that wide receiver room, and that might also influence why I had them so low. Good depth at running back, especially young depth. Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Kendre Miller, Isaiah Spiller, all in their second or third years. And the way this league format is set up with the points per first down counting, I've always thought the points per first down really help the players who get more touches. That's more opportunity to get first down. I mean, the quarterbacks technically touch the ball on every play, but oftentimes it's quarterbacks and running backs that benefit most from the first down points, I find. So I find running back depth incredibly important. So at least they ranked well there. Great tight end room. In fact, I almost think they have too many tight ends. McBride, Freiermuth, Dawson Knox, Taysom Hill. The problem is no one really has a bad tight end room, so I don't know if you can even really sell anyone on any of those guys except McBride, but that's the one guy you don't want to sell because that is sort of in that elite tier of tight end right now. So if anything, I have to cut one of those guys, Knox or Taysom Hill, and maybe again keep pushing that running back depth. This team's, I do like the way they're constructed in that regard, but I guess really a solid QB2 because we don't know how many starts Russell Wilson's going to get. Josh Allen's amazing, QB1 in Dynasty. It feels weird to rank the Josh Allen team this low in a Superflex league, but with Wilson as the QB2, Tyrod Taylor as the QB3. Feels like young receivers and quarterbacks where this team needs to target, but those are also seemingly the toughest pieces to acquire. 109, 202, you might be able to get rookie players at those positions. Yeah. Get engaged, do better. McBride, right? Yeah, that's funny. That's funny all about the TDs. I do like Trey McBride. It's a good Trey McBride joke.
So I had this team ranked the lowest out of all of them, and it comes down to how I like to build my teams. If you see any of my, this isn't necessarily a full rebuild, but it's close to that rebuild status. I like to have the receivers and the quarterbacks locked down, and I keep punting my running backs until I get to the point where I feel like I can compete with some good running backs. This team's kind of built the opposite. This team's got a little bit of older receivers that aren't necessarily studs. You got Michael Williams currently in starting roster, Cortland Sutton. Devontae Adams is still a stud, but you mentioned Deebo Samuel getting older as well. And then you mentioned that big stable of running backs. Those running backs, by the time you fill those other needs on this team, you're going to want more running backs. They're already going to be aged out. So I like to build my team around my receivers. Receivers first, then my quarterback, and then I'll get my running backs last. And that's kind of why I had this team ranked last, because I do think that these running backs are great. Like you mentioned, they're young. But by the time this team is ready to truly compete with filling some of these holes that they have, the running backs are going to be at the end of their contract, their first contract, which is usually when the running backs start to fall off. So that's why I had him at 9. What are your thoughts on this team, Shane?
Yeah, I agree with Kyle when it comes to the running back room. Kyle and I have always kind of had that same train of thought of running back. So that's probably one reason that I had them ranked a little higher than you did, Jeff. Like Jahmyr Gibbs and James Cook, like that's a hell of a duo to have when it comes to Dynasty. But I think what concerned me the most was easily the quarterback room, because it's Josh Allen and then Russell Wilson, who we haven't seen be the same Russell Wilson. And there's rumors that Justin Fields, who I think that's another story for another day, actually later on in the podcast. But there's some major concerns. And now Josh Allen too, the thing is like, he's going to be running for his fantasy production because he doesn't have anyone to throw to. His wide receiver 1 right now is Curtis Samuel.
He's got the stack.
Who at best I think is a wide receiver 3.
Yep.
So
if he's healthy at that.
Well,
yeah.
I think we've seen him be a good wide receiver too at points in his career, but again, he's probably past his prime as well. But he's not going to have a choice but to be at least the wide receiver 2 on this team.
Yeah, exactly. So that was probably my 2 biggest concerns there. Your tight end room is like Kyle mentioned, solid. I'd probably cut Dawson Knox, even though he does have that connection.
I hate Taysom Hill, and I would cut him. Now, I think because it's on Sleeper, because I know one thing that's happened with MFL is that Taysom Hill has lost his tight end eligibility, so he's just a quarterback. I think Sleeper hasn't done that, so there's still some value there.
Yeah.
Taysom Hill actually in Sleeper, at least in the kind of restart draft that I'm doing right now, actually has tight end QB dual eligibility.
Yep.
Which is cheating. And I also hate Taysom Hill, so if you want to cut him, go right ahead.
Now, Kyle, let me ask you here: if you're taking this team over and you're looking to fill some of the holes here, and you wanted to trade somebody away, who's the player you're looking to move? Is it Deebo Samuel because he still has value coming off a pretty good season, or are you looking to move someone like Josh Allen?
You see, I still have Josh Allen ranked as the QB1 in Dynasty because his ceiling comes from rushing touchdowns. So I'm not as concerned with the absence of Diggs. I also want to see what they do in the draft before then. Maybe I will raise CJ Stroud to the QB1. Who knows? But no, I'd consider selling Josh Allen if someone also believes, like I do, that he's still the QB1 and is willing to pay QB1 overall price. But anything short of that, I'm probably not selling him. I wonder, though, I joked about the stack. Actually, you'd have a Josh Allen, James Cook stack. So now that Curtis Samuel is the only receiver there, is he the guy that's actually got good trade value right now? Maybe before the NFL draft. So a little bit of talk about the previous team, right? Sell a Quentin Johnson, sell a Zamir White before the NFL draft. I would say Curtis Samuel is probably that one guy I want to sell right now.
Fair enough.
And I've tried selling Mike Williams. 3 or 4 leagues I'm in, and the most I could get was a 304 in a 14-team league. So
yeah,
Mike Williams has no value right now. You can sell him if you want, just like a late. I guess this team already has the 304, so maybe you get the 303. It's get back to back, but it feels like for some of these guys, it's almost too late to sell. Again, I wonder if just a little bit of spike in value with Curtis Samuel because of where he landed, Diggs being traded, he might be the guy I'd look to sell first.
Yeah, I think a lot of his guys looking at his roster have lost value in the offseason. Mike Williams being one. I think Cortland Sutton has lost value, at least as of right now.
Apparently, it's
Devontae
a no
Adams.
wide receiver in PPR strategy. That God Strike and all about the TDs are kind of build the opposite to win. So yeah, they don't seem to like this old wide receiver room, and that if that's any indication, there's probably not much value to trade out of this wide receiver room.
Agreed. All right, let's get to team number 8.
Number 8.
Number 8 team, pretty big disparity here. Ranked as low as 10, as high as 5, and it is Big Bravs, and it is Shane. This is your team.
Yeah. Looking at this team, I might have been a little bit high on them, and I'm going to base that on my bias for Sam Howell. I think the QB room has potential. Hurts to me is top 4. And then Purdy, I think on your show, Jeff, actually was my nominee for fantasy MVP because of the value that he brought.
He almost won league MVP. Very close.
Yeah. Yeah. So
not just Jeff, but Shane is a savant as well.
So Purdy was just so underrated from a fantasy perspective when it came to his production with the value that you got with the draft capital that you likely invested in him. So I like Purdy from a fantasy perspective, and I think Howell will start at some point. Jeff is probably sick of me talking about Sam Howell, but I love Sam Howell. I think he's a starting quarterback in the NFL, and I think he will eventually beat out Geno this year. Even if he doesn't, I think this is a great move for his career.
Just real quick before we move past that, I just want to. Shane was also really high on Baker Mayfield getting a starting job once again. So there is some history there with quarterbacks that he kind of hangs on to forever. So
thank you. And the next one is going to be Bo Nix. Just throwing that out there now. So I got lost in my notes. Here's the problem is, not even a problem. It's actually potentially good for you. Who knows what the loser that's the starting quarterback in Cleveland is going to do this year? Is he going to play? Is he going to hurt like his fingernail and be out for the rest of the season? Who knows? So James could start multiple games for you. Your running backs are balanced, and we're holding out hope that in the NFL draft they don't get too much competition, because then you should be fine. The area where you're struggling is wide receiver. It leaves a little bit to be desired. You do have Calvin Ridley, who I like a lot, and I love Jahan Dotson. I also highlighted some other guys that I missed when I was doing my notes, and that's Josh Palmer and Wan'Dale Robinson. Palmer right now, I think, has a good shot to be the wide receiver 2 in LA, and he's done really well in that role and should give you some decent flex value. Wan'Dale Robinson is such a wild card, but has the athleticism and skill set to be really good in fantasy. He's just not been healthy, and then when he has been healthy, he's been getting passes from Daniel Jones. So hopefully one of those situations will change, and he can actually, be a little bit better. As far as tight end, I love Cole Kmet, always have been. Wasn't officially a member of the Cole Kmet Club on Twitter, but should have been. You just need somebody for his bye week. Noah Gray is a great dynasty hold, I think, because they've kind of been grooming him behind Kelsey. And actually, if you paid attention last year, they sprinkled him in a little bit more last year. I think he was averaging like 5 targets a game, roughly. So I like Gray, but you definitely need a tight end for Cole Kmet's bye week if you don't trust Gray to fill that in.
Yeah, so this team, I'm looking at it in the things that stand out to me. You mentioned the running back room is, Kyron Williams, Jonathan Taylor, even Stevenson, I think, still has some really good value.
Yeah, Brian Robinson, I think.
Even Stevenson is the best nickname ever, Jeff. That was amazing. I know you didn't even do that on purpose. That is how much of a savant you are. It just came out.
That was beautiful.
Really solid running back room. Receiver room, a little bit to be desired. But Kyle, let me ask you on this team, is there any pieces that stand out to you that you'd want to try to move?
Well, so I am the one that ranked them 10. And my whole thing was, this is probably the worst wide receiver room and the worst tight end room in the league. And they have 5 picks, which I think no one in the league had more than 6, but none of the picks are earlier than 208. So yes, there's quality in capital, but I don't think enough. Like there's quantity in draft capital, but not quality. So yeah, I mean, I love Josh Palmer too, but yeah, to the point earlier, I mean, he probably shouldn't be a wide receiver one for an NFL team, let alone this fantasy team. I guess I'm not as big a believer in Calvin Ridley going to Tennessee. I still have questions about Will Levis, and frankly, I know he's old. I guess they're both old because I think Ridley will be 30 now. I don't think Calvin Ridley's better than DeAndre Hopkins. I know some people, they look at the contract that they have assumed, okay, he's the wide receiver one there. To me, Hopkins was never a fast receiver. It was always the hands. Great hands. Maybe some of the best in the league, right? Yeah, that was kind of awkward. But he still has that ability to make catches downfield, even if he's not a burner. He doesn't have to burn past defensive backs. He's one of the best at making contested catches in the NFL. And Will Levis seems like that type of risky throw it up and let the guy go make a play. And, Ridley can have some of that separation. Well, he's never really been a super fast guy either. He's been get open deep. I just don't think he's as good as Hopkins. And if they're playing similar roles, I think I'd rather bet on Hopkins. And maybe with this 4-year contract, people have some hype on Ridley. So I know it's one of the top receivers on this team, but it's already such a weak room. I don't mind making it even weaker, really digging into that, the strength at every other position. Because I love Hurts. Like, it hurt me to rank the team with Jalen Hurts last. Someone had to be last, though. I think, I just couldn't look past how poor I thought both the wide receiver and tight end room is. And Cole Kmet's not bad, but I would argue in the 10-team league, he's the worst starting tight end of anyone else in this league. Yeah. This would maybe be the one team that they should go try and trade for a tight end. Because I think this team probably could compete. So is this the team that goes and trades for Travis Kelce? For talk about that other manager a couple teams ago. Like, there probably isn't a huge market for Kelce, let alone Hill. Like, Hill might have some, but Kelce, it almost seems like with so many teams set at tight end, there's probably no market for him in this league. This could be the one team that might want to pair a Kelce with a Jalen Hurts and just go for it. And I think I could buy into that, especially if it costs you 24 picks and not 25 picks. Because, again, the highest they have is 208. So you package 208 and, I don't know, that other team likes old receivers so much, 208 and Ridley to go get Kelce. You're strengthening your tight end position. You're slightly making your receiver room weaker, but it's already your weakest position. So I think you can I think the thought we all had looking at that receiver room is he needs to add to that. But maybe do you just keep leaning into that, strengthen every other position, and try and just get by at wide receiver? Especially in a league with points of first down, you want to just like flex running backs and you minimize the wide receiver exposure.
Here's my question with that though, Kyle. Like, are you comfortable weakening the wide receiver room to go get Kelce, who's dropped off?
I think with Ridley, yes, because I don't like Ridley. That's why I named him specifically. But yeah, like to your point with like Palmer and Wandale, I don't really want to sell those guys to go get another tight end. Yeah, but no, I think if you can do it for Ridley, I'd do it. But there's probably no one else on the team you could do it for.
Yeah, and I think Kelce is one of those players that right now his value is low because of the perceived age. But if you wait till the start of the season, I think his value goes back up. I do think he still has enough in it that he's still going to be one of the top tight ends, probably not the top tight end anymore. But, this time he's cheap. At this time of year, he's cheap. You can probably go get him for a little bit cheaper than you could if you wait till week 3 or week 4 when he's had at least 1 or 2 monster games already. And Kelce's back, and now you can't get him because you got to pay premium for him. So right now would be the time you'd want to buy Kelce for sure.
Going to keep putting this Devontae Parker comment.
Yes, the quote from the God Strike on the chat for the audio people out there. Shane's best quote from last year: Devontae Parker is a piece of shit.
Was he rostered in this league?
I don't think he's rostered anymore, which is fantastic.
I think your message got through to them, Shane. Well done.
Good job, Shane. Good job. All right, let's get to team number 7.
Number 7,
another pretty big disparity here. Ranked as high as 4, as low as 9. It is Dave Katz. And Kyle, this is your team here.
So back to who asked that again? Oh yeah, it was Jason Miller. Do we take draft capital into account? I rank this team 4 because they have the best draft capital in this, or arguably the best draft capital in this league. There's another team that doesn't have the same quantity of picks, but even maybe better quality. But having the 104, 105, and 107 gives them kind of good control over the middle of the first round. That especially kind of right now, pre-draft, view it as a top 5, a clear top 5. And some would even say top 7. So if you're going with what other people say, you've got 3 picks inside that tier break. I would say you have 2 picks, though, inside that really top-end tier break. still get a really good prospect, and also maybe probably at least one quarterback, which kind of this team could use as that second QB. As much as I love Justin Fields, I think I love Fields as much as Shane loves Sam Howell. So we're both kind of banking on them taking over for those old guys. It's funny, it's Geno Smith and Russell Wilson. Funny enough, those are the two they're fighting against. Two guys that fought themselves for the Seattle job. But it feels like, hey, they'll at least be able to add one QB to this. And, you know, if they're taking a quarterback draft in the top 3, top 4 of the NFL draft, we're imagining they're getting starts right from the get-go. So Kyler and the rookie makes the QB room better to the point where that's why I was willing to rank them at 4. There's no really elite running back. I mean, production-wise, if you had Mostert production last year, this year, it'd be amazing. I don't know if you can bank on that many touchdowns, but pretty good running back depth. I mean, the last two, Sean Tucker, Cam Akers, I don't know there's much usefulness there, but you can, you know, and this might be a team that's opposite of what we just talked about. Their wide receiver room, that goes so deep that you're probably going to, this is a team that wants to flex as many receivers as possible. And then you're only going to start 2 running backs a week. So likely, say, Mostert and Javonte Williams, as you're waiting to see what happens with Nick Chubb, waiting to see like what happens in Cincinnati. Is Chase Brown the lead guy? Is Zach Moss? If anything, maybe Chase Brown's a sell right now, because what happens if the Bengals draft another running back and suddenly it's a 3-man committee, right? That's another possibility of a young running back that might have good value right now, especially if someone, maybe say a Canadian like me, believes that Chase Brown's better than Zach Moss and he is currently the lead back for the Bengals. It might be peak value. So that's all about going out, sending offers in this league and finding out who values Chase Brown. That'd be kind of the one guy that kind of stands out to me is, even though he's like the youngest running back, he might be a sell because that's where the value's at.
Yeah.
Great wide receiver room, though, like Olave, Diggs, Kirk, Johnson, Judy, Downs, Mooney. Heck, even Darius Slayton's probably a starting wide receiver. Like, that's how deep you can go and still feel comfortable starting these guys, I think. So, you know, and one of the best tight end rooms in the league, frankly. My tight end 2 in Dynasty, Kincaid, Hawkinson as well. Tucker Kraft, Juwan Johnson, that almost feels like you don't need 4 tight ends. I guess I kind of get it with Hawkinson's injury, but yeah, Kincaid got a huge boost with this Stephon Diggs trade. And I guess having Diggs on this team, suddenly it almost helps both their value. It certainly helps Kincaid's value, I think, how many targets he's going to see this year, but hoping that Diggs sees some good action with Houston. Suddenly you have it's helped 2 of your starters on this team as well. So some good things have happened to this team already. The Chase Brown, Mixon leaving, that's helped Chase Brown maybe enough to go and sell him.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great breakdown in his receiver core. This is kind of how I want to build my teams with the receivers that he has. In going to your Raheem Mostert comment there about his production last year, I think it's funny that he has the nickname Jamal Williams 2.0 because, of course, Jamal Williams had 18 touchdowns 2 years ago and did absolutely nothing this past year.
And Jamal Williams is on this team, so he's hoping for a rebound.
Yeah, exactly.
Javonte Williams and Jamal Williams. That would confuse me. I would definitely make a wrong move somewhere. So I don't know. Do you sell Javonte just to get out of the 2 Williams so you don't confuse yourself?
Yeah, you don't get confused. So there's a couple guys here I wanted to ask you about, Shane, and one of them is one of the guys that Kyle talked about, and that's Stephon Diggs, who he's going to a team that's got a great quarterback, but he's also got some really good competition where he hasn't really had that in Buffalo or even in Minnesota when he was there. What are your thoughts on Diggs in Houston, and do you think he still has that wide receiver 1 type production there, or do you think he falls into a mid receiver 2?
Jeff, that's a fantastic question. First off, so doing some research, the Diggs quote unquote fall off towards the end of the season has been blown up out of proportion a little bit. When they switched offensive coordinators, they went extremely run heavy from their offensive perspective. So naturally, Diggs is going to be limited a little bit more from an actual production standpoint. So from a talent perspective, I do still think he has that ability to go be a wide receiver 1. However, because he's going to Houston, where you've got Nico Collins and Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz and now Joe Mixon, there's a shit ton of target competition there that while yes, I do think he will have some wide receiver 1 weeks because that's just going to be how it's going to play out. I think it's going to be 1 week it's Diggs, 1 week it's Dell, 1 week it's Collins.
What we saw last year from Houston, it was
Exactly.
Same thing. Yep.
Exactly. So
Noah Brown had a wide receiver overall 1 week
yeah,
overall.
exactly.
And
So
he's still on the team, to be honest, too.
yeah, so I think the potential for Diggs to do that week in and week out isn't necessarily there. But he's someone you still probably have to easily start in a wide receiver spot, not even just a flex spot, but definitely a wide receiver spot.
Yep. I love it. Anything else before we get to team number 6?
Well, and I think this is a good place to transition out of here because it's more general, but just funny that Jeff's rankings for this almost basically followed the rankings exactly. And actually, these last 2 teams, Big Bravs, Jeff had at 7. Shane and I together made it 8, even though our rankings were so different. Jeff had Dave Katz at 8, and again, Shane and I are so different that it ended up being 7, 8. But basically, everything else, Jeff's rankings will follow the whole thing through. So I just found that fun.
Yeah,
I didn't even notice that, but yeah, good call. It does kind of follow the same path there.
yeah. The only thing I wanted to mention, just because he's on the roster, is Justin Fields is great for fantasy, but overrated as an NFL quarterback. He holds the ball way too damn long, and I think that will ultimately be his downfall to getting playing time in the NFL. So if you can find somebody who loves Fields as much or more as Kyle, go sell him to that person fast.
Yeah, I lucked out and sold Fields when we still thought he might be going to Atlanta.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
saw Fields traded right around that time too in a league, and yeah, it's that's some decent value on that.
Now, if there's a coach in the NFL that I think can get it right with Fields, I do think Tomlin is that guy. So there's maybe a little hope there, but I've never been a believer. I've always thought he held the ball too long, and he's continued to prove that in the NFL, in my opinion.
And say what you will about Russell Wilson being corny, he's great for the backup quarterback. He's that positive guy. He's not the Aaron Rodgers where he's like,
yeah, go learn yourself.
Exactly. He will be good for Fields. I mean, look what Geno Smith did once Russell Wilson left there. You know, I do think Fields, as far as learning the ins and outs of the NFL, Russell Wilson's a good person to have in front of him.
The joke I'm making is that Wilson can probably help Fields football wise so much. But any Bears player that's spoken publicly about it, they're not excited about Caleb Williams, but it seems like the general consensus is they're just sad that Justin Fields is not on this team. He was truly beloved in that locker room. It seems like every player had his back. And so, if anything, Wilson could maybe learn how to be a good teammate from Fields because it seems there's former teammates have no problem crapping all over Wilson. I'll hold the swears off a little bit better than Shane, apparently. I'll try and set a good example. Maybe like Fields will for Russell Wilson.
I know I couldn't have picked 2 more opposite guys. I mean, not only are y'all rankings, pretty much opposite of each other. Shane's on here dropping F-bombs 3 minutes into the podcast, and Kyle won't even say shit. So that's hilarious. I love it.
I mean, some of our rankings are close, but yeah, apparently we're awesome. But we have to rank All About TD's number 3, though, or top 3. We still haven't got to him yet, so do we get to them next? I guess we'll find out. Stay tuned, folks.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's get to number 6.
Number 6.
Number 6 team, pretty close consensus here. We got him as high as 6 and as low as 7. It is TK Wood. Shane, this is your squad.
I did not realize I was actually the lowest one on this guy. My notes are, I feel like you're pretty short on this one. QB room is solid. Like, there's not a better word for it. You have 3 starting NFL QBs that will score you fantasy points consistently. You're great. Your running back room.
And Jordan Love might be one of the best QB duos as well, just as a top.
Yeah. Now there's one team later on that we're going to talk about that I think has a better QB room, and you rank them much lower.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. It's funny because the first iteration of my rankings, they were higher, and I guess they got screwed by my second ranking. I am looking in hindsight, that probably was a little low, but you know what? It didn't really affect the overall ranking. So we'll say all is right in the universe because they're still ranked pretty high.
Yes. Your running back room is old, but I still think solid. The biggest question mark is going to be Barkley and Aaron Jones because they've both been great for fantasy. Like Aaron Jones, I want to do a deep dive study on it because there's him and Alvin Kamara. and now I guess we can add in Jamal Williams and Raheem Mostert that just like have this nose and this knack for finding the end zone. And I don't get it. Like, I want to figure out like what is it that they all have that they just score touchdowns. So their completely new situations though worry me a little bit, as well as their age is getting up there, especially for the running back. Tight end, you were set with 3 startable guys. You could easily trade one of them to the Cole Kmet guy. Wide receiver is, again, good, but old. I love T. Higgins and hope from a selfish standpoint that he gets traded to the Jaguars or the Panthers, because I think he would immediately kind of, even with Deontay Johnson in Carolina, I think he would still skyrocket from a value standpoint there. And then you've got Amari as well, who's been fairly consistent in Cleveland despite having a reputation for being kind of boom or bust. But having both of them on the team would cause me to drink heavily, because T. Higgins last year, I think he was the most rostered player on teams that just absolutely sucked. Now I made it to and won the championship in my home dynasty with T. Higgins. So,
I was going to say, is that the reason I only had 1 T. Higgins share?
yeah, probably.
Wait, how did most of my teams still suck? No, I think half my teams made the playoffs. I think it's just over half. But yeah.
But that, like, that's just painful. And then I think if there's one player that I would try to get off of, it's DeAndre Hopkins, because despite like the talent is still there, like Kyle mentioned earlier in the show, but his age is just continuing to climb. And like Jeff has said multiple times, you want to be a year early on players, not a year late. And I think it's time to get out of DeAndre Hopkins.
Kyle, I want to ask you, because, you know, the running back room, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, pretty solid group there. But Saquon Barkley, of course, changing teams. And the worry with Saquon Barkley, it's twofold. One, Jalen Hurts does not check it down to his running backs very often. He'd prefer just to run it, so you're not going to get those cheap checkdowns to Barkley. And then 2, the tush push, which is why some running backs have gone there and not succeeded, because they're not getting those touchdowns. What did you do with Barkley in your rankings? Did he raise up because he's in a better offense with Philly and a better offensive line, or did it hurt him because of those 2 things I just mentioned?
So knowing what consensus was before he switched teams, I think I was already lower on consensus. Like I think I had him at RB10 in Dynasty, which, listening to a lot of people in other podcasts, it seems like he was closer to RB6 in the top 6 for a lot of people. And I've gone. Okay, apparently TK Wood is people off the show that are lower on him than us. But yeah, I think I've lowered Barkley to like RB14. And it really, Jeff, it was the first thing you mentioned, the lack of receptions. Because that's been the bread and butter of Barkley's fantasy value. He's essentially been the top target on his team his entire career.
Because they haven't had anyone to throw to.
And there are 2 elite receivers on this team. I don't think there's any way he's even second on the team in targets.
And Goddard.
You see, and unfortunately, this team has Goddard, so you're kind of screwed either way. I don't think Goddard's that impressive. That like Barkley's talent, if it comes to targets over the middle, I imagine Barkley gets more priority than Goddard. But Goddard also has a relationship already with Hurts. He's been on that team, so maybe he still maintains that, especially early. And Barkley, the receiving work comes later, but I still think it'll be reduced. His ability to score from far tells me I think he'll still get enough touchdowns, probably more touchdowns than what we've seen from a lot of other Eagles running backs. You know, he's not going to get dragged down at the 1 like Swift. He'll get that extra yard, it seems like. But yeah, I guess I'm less concerned with the touchdowns because of how a lot of his touchdowns have come. But it also, I guess part of it is he gets a lot of receiving touchdowns too. So I guess if he's not catching those receptions, maybe it does ultimately hurt his touchdown. Either way, as much as it's a better offense, yes, I did lower Barkley in my dynasty rankings. And now I guess if TK Wood can find someone in the league who thinks the opposite of me, I don't know, Shane, you can chime in on that too. I guess this is your team to talk about. But like, if you can find someone who actually thinks this is because I've also heard that narrative that this is a good thing for Barkley, just the best offensive line he's ever played behind.
Mm-hmm.
They're all pro center. They still have a lot of pretty good pieces everywhere else in the line, including a couple all pro players still. But if you could find someone in the league who believes that, he might be a good sell.
Shane, where do you fall on the Barkley situation?
I don't know. Hold on. Come back to me in just a second.
Yeah, so it's tough with Barkley because you're right. I mean, behind the best offensive line he's ever had, we saw him even in New York break those big runs behind that crappy offensive line where they're stacking the box, and they can't stack the box against Philly with those receivers you mentioned. So we joked a lot on the DFS pod last year. Whenever we clicked the DeAndre Swift button, we were just hoping he could score from 10 yards out. Like, get the 10-yard touchdown, because once you get into the 2 or 3 yard line, you're not getting it. It was kind of a running joke there that if he didn't score from 10 yards out, then he wasn't useless. He was useless in DFS. So
going from a running joke, I gotta say the rest of the running back room is like, it's basically Aaron Jones. There's not much depth here. So like, can you turn Barkley even like into like maybe a couple running backs, one of which is younger? I'm looking like there's a couple players I think I would just outright cut as well. One of them is Damian Harris, who just announced his retirement. So he's a pretty safe cut, I think. Logan Thomas still hasn't signed. Darren Waller might retire. I'd probably cut at least one of those two. I think Waller has more upside, so I'd probably default to Logan Thomas. But like, cut Harris for another running back, cut Thomas for another running back. I really don't feel like this team, having Thomas on the team, isn't going to make or break it. Like, the tight end room isn't that great anyway. But adding a fourth kind of clogger that I don't think, it doesn't seem to make the team better. So
yeah,
that spot, especially Logan Thomas, cut for another running back. I think that's how I'd reinvest it, because this team really does lack depth at running back. High end's great with the RB1, but yeah, depth at running back is so important.
All right, so we ready to move to team number 5?
Number 5.
Number 5 team, pretty big disparity here. High is number 2, as low is number 6, and it is J-Dog 422. And Kyle, this is your squad.
Yeah, and I did rank them number 2. So 3 starting quarterbacks. I don't know how solid the fantasy production will be, but it also does seem like there's still, in spite of how bad both Watson and Young did, they're still kind of valued as top 20 dynasty quarterbacks. So there's also this, like, there's trade value here. And with the way Dak's going, he's the oldest one. He's the most solid in terms of production. Might not produce what he did last year, leading the league in touchdowns, but he still showed that he deserves it. I know in my rankings, he's still a top 10 quarterback. So you've got at least that one solid foundational piece and the 103, which I think is huge. It's not like the other team we mentioned, which had 3 first-round picks. So even though this team picks before them at 103, still feels like that other team kind of does control more of the board to a certain extent. Based on what J-Dog 42-2 on his team, I think wide receiver is probably the move at 103. You add a third, like right now, Marvin Harrison, assuming it would be the pick, but let's say, he might go 102, and let's say you have to go with Neighbors. Those are still probably viewed as at least top 15 wide receivers in Dynasty, it seems like, from consensus. So adding that to A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson, given that third solid young piece, kind of complements like a Brandon Cooks and a Mike Evans. I think towards the end of the wide receiver room, like A.T. Perry, Justin Shorter, I suppose Shorter's gotten a gain in value to the point where, if you could sell him for anything, if it's like 25 picks, I'd be fine with that. Because I don't know that he's, even with losing Diggs, I don't know that Shorter necessarily elevates and is immediately going to be an every snap kind of player for the Bills. And I feel like they're going to add other rookie receivers, and Shorter's still going to be a depth guy there. A.T. Perry with the Saints might be the same thing, but it's nice to have several young pieces. And again, really balanced wide receiver room. Doesn't have to be too deep. And that's why I think adding, say, like a Marvin Harrison or Neighbors at 103 is perfect for this room. That don't really need to add too many bodies at wide receiver. Can you just add high quality guys? And 103 might be the cheapest way to acquire one, since the pick's already on your team.
Yeah, that's a good breakdown. And I was looking at his picks. You mentioned the first rounder, the 103, but he have the 201, the 203, and the 205, I believe, something like that.
Just 201 and 205.
201 and 205.
Yeah.
Those in a super flex league are pretty much going to be running backs. I think. One or two might.
Team, you might get some of those receivers to fall, like someone who got first round draft.
201 could be real solid, especially with the way the wide receiver depth in this class breaks down. You could still get a solid one there.
Yeah.
But 205 could easily be a running back.
This team doesn't really have a clear need. Can you package both seconds together to get a player and just add a high quality player? I think the weakest room is probably the tight end room. It's not awful. I guess sort of compared to Cole Kmet, and maybe even the last time we talked about Dallas Goedert, Musgrave's probably on that standing of those would be the 3 teams that would go out and trade for Kelsey. I think this team has enough other young pieces that it could probably sustain going out and trying to get an older guy like a Kelsey. Also, one last point. This is one of the best running back rooms because there is really good depth to it, and there's high-end talent with Breece Hall and Devon Achane. That's, I think, I've got both in my top 6 running backs right now in Dynasty. And that's pretty, like, other positions, you could see rookies coming up. I don't see anyone from this rookie class taking either of those out of the top 6.
No.
So that duo is great. Then, Joe Mixon, Chuba Hubbard, Jerome Ford, all 3 could be starting running backs for their teams. I think Ty Chandler could get enough work. We'll see what happens with Evan Hull if he retires, or if he retires. If he recovers from his injury, and I hope he doesn't retire early. He did get hurt in his first NFL game. He hasn't played since, so we'll see if he can come in and be the solid main backup behind Jonathan Taylor. That gives potential other starter down the line if Taylor does get hurt. So really solid running back room, and I think because of, again, the importance of first downs, I think that might be why having the 103 and the 3 quarterbacks, I think all 3 factors why I was so much higher on them. Again, having them at 2 as opposed to Shane, who still, I guess, not top half the league, but still had him at 6 in that middle tier.
Yeah. So I was going to go to you, Shane. What are your thoughts on this team, and why didn't you like it as much as Kyle?
I mean, the glaring one is Deshaun Watson. But there are other players on the roster that I'm just not a huge fan of. And like Joe Mixon is 28 or 29 at this point. He should be the lead back in Houston, but we already mentioned that there's going to be a ton of target competition for him there. Chuba Hubbard is currently the starting running back in Carolina, but that could easily be fixed. Jerome Ford
is that a sell right now, to be honest?
Absolutely. Same with Ty
this
Chandler.
Team has enough running back depth that you can afford to not have to get a running back. Maybe someone who really needs a running back right now. That's how you maximize value. As much as he's a Canadian and I love Chuba Hubbard, yeah, he might be a good sell. To your point, Shane. Sorry.
No, you're good. Same with Ty Chandler as a potential sell, because who knows what that backfield could look like. It should be Aaron Jones, but Jones has had some health issues in the past. I think the tight end room is solid. You've got Musgrave and Meyer, 2 young, really good tight ends. You've got everybody on Twitter's favorite tight end for the last year, Chig. And Gesicki in Cincinnati is really intriguing. Yeah, I honestly think just my hate for Deshaun Watson probably pushed this team lower because that
I'm shocked
dude
you had them 6th and not like 10th just out of principle.
is a piece of shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely is. But again, part of me thinks though, with one of these young tight ends, can that be the key where that's what makes the Kelsey manager move off and you get one of these young elite tight ends? Maybe they believe in Myers. Maybe they like what they saw from Musgrave. And even if you had Kelsey this room, you still have other young tight ends too to work with. So it doesn't.
Well, and they like old wide receivers. So send Chig and Mike Evans or.
So we want this player to trade for a Titan. Trade Kelsey for a Titan, whether it's Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Chig Okonkwo. This dude needs to add a Titan to that team. Is what we're declaring here.
Yep.
All right, good stuff, gentlemen. Let's get to team number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4 team ranked as high as 1 and as low as 7. And it is Raclar 2. I'm guessing how you say that. And Shane, this is your team.
But yeah.
You had them at 1. So Shane,
you're goddamn right. I had them at number 1. You've got Patrick Mahomes and Trevor Lawrence. Like, holy shit. That to me is the best QB room in the league. Not only because of those 2, but then Stafford is your QB3. Holy mother of God. Like, gimme. It's beautiful. Now, your running back room is thin, and while Kyle and I typically agree on that and how much we love running backs, that is the scariest part. But Swift and ETN, I think, will suffice for you as RB1 and RB2. You've also got Zach Moss in Cincinnati, who we've belabored to this point. That's going to be an interesting running back room, whether it's Moss, whether it's Chase Brown, or if they go and draft someone and make it a 3-headed monster for fantasy players. The other thing that I think you've got going for you is you have 3 players that can finish as their positional overall number 1. Mahomes, Chase, and Mark Andrews. Your wide receiver depth when it comes to your wide receiver depth is concerning, especially with the Rashee Rice situation. Quick shout out, go follow Drew Davenport on Twitter, X, Elon Musk Funhouse, whatever the hell you want to call it. He does an hashtag FF legal update and is
They're
really
awesome.
good at what. Yeah, they're phenomenal.
They are.
So he's constantly updating different legal situations, and he's been doing that with Rashee Rice. I think you've got 3 wide receivers that can be flex plays, and really the only one that potentially can elevate that week to week is Lockett. But you've got Lockett, you've got Jacoby Myers, who's been pretty much underrated his whole career. And then Zay Jones has chemistry with Trevor Lawrence and continues to piss me off as a Jags fan. Pickens should have improved QB play and will slot in well as your wide receiver too. So I think you'll end up being fine. But that QB room is just absolutely a thing of beauty. Like, I don't know why Kyle was so low on it. And it's probably because of your draft capital. But
yeah, I think that was one of them. I am kind of questioning. I probably shouldn't have had them this low.
But I love your team.
Yeah, in hindsight, I think if I had to re-rank this, I'd probably honestly switch them and the next team we're about to talk about, which I had it ranked at 5. And I just kind of went and did that. If I did do that, our consensus would have flipped, and Rackler 2 would actually be at number 3, and the next team we talk about would be 4. So you could blame me for that. I guess, yeah, the draft capital. I mean, I don't love Etienne as an RB1 either, and I also didn't think there was enough depth. And yeah, I don't know if people are really trading for Chig. I know last year I packaged him with a second to get Dalton Schultz in a league. That seems like that's how you're going to have to sell Chig. Use a draft pick to tier up from him to get a better tight end. And that's why I was thinking, like, throw a pick and Chig to get Kelsey. Maybe they want to get younger at tight end, and you're adding draft capital. Like, maybe, but they also, again, to Shane's point, they seem to like older receivers. They have Kelsey. They may want to just stick old and productive and try and still win now. Chig wouldn't be as appealing in that case, even though they still would have Evan Ingram. So, and again, maybe they don't want a tight end for Kelsey. Maybe they want something else. But I mean, just to ramble on here, I probably messed up on the Rackler 2 rating because this QB room is great. I still don't think it's the best QB duo, but I think overall QB room, Shane might be right that this is the best.
Yeah, I agree. And I wanted to talk something real quick about a comment that All About TDs had in the chat about this draft going potentially 13 deep and being landing spot dependent. And I agree. I think this year, especially for the running backs, landing spot is almost more important than draft capital. Like, I can see,
because none of them are going to get capital. So yeah, you're right.
Right. And I can even see like the number 3 or 4 running back off the board. If they were to go to the Cowboys, I think they might move up to the RB1, even though they may not be the first running back taken in the NFL draft. If they go to the Cowboys, then I think that does raise their value. So landing spot is almost more important this year, at least for the running backs. And you're right. I mean, you get a running back going to the Cowboys, you get a running back going to the Chargers, and I think those, kind of can fit into that top 13-ish, top 14-ish players when you get to those receivers and quarterbacks as well thrown in there. So good comment in there, All About TDs. All right. Are we ready to move on to team number 3?
Yep.
So I got to find the drop here somewhere. There we go.
Number 3.
All right. The number 3 team, as Kyle mentioned, he had him the lowest at 5. Me and Shane both had him at 3. It is Godstrike, and he is in the chat tonight. So, Kyle, break this down.
Let it rip.
Yeah, so I think first off, actually, one thing I noticed was 2 through 5 in terms of our aggregate ranking is separated by 1.3 points. So this was also a super close range. Part of it was the Rackler, the huge disparity from me having him at 7, Shane at 1. But especially these top 2 teams, I mean, all 3 of us had them in all of our top 5s. So yeah, with Godstrike, 3 solid quarterbacks. I know that was a difference maker with some of these teams only having 2. So Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield. I might argue, though, Tua is probably the weakest QB1 of any team in this league, but that's okay because you have 2 other solid, pretty quarterbacks, even though they're even older than Tua is. But I think QB isn't the problem. Running back depth. They've got 4 running backs on roster, and one of them is Miles Sanders, so it almost feels like that doesn't count. Oh yeah, the one thing we didn't have access to was 25 first. So you're telling me this team has 3 25 first? Yeah, I don't know if I'd raise them to 4. I really did like Dave Katz's team, but maybe I think it would, maybe maintain this top 5 pretty easily with that kind of extra capital. They also defending champ because they have the 110, and I'm pretty sure it was their own 110 pick. Like, it doesn't say traded from somebody. So congrats, Godstrike. You struck gold last year. The one thing I will say, probably the best tight end room in the league and the best wide receiver room. And so the opposite of, say, Big Bravs that I ranked at 10. Even though there might be some, again, the running back depth really does scare me, though. So it does feel like when you got to a certain point at the bottom of the wide receivers, it's so deep, it's almost unnecessary. I mean, not almost. It is kind of unnecessary. I mean, Sky Moore, he just feels like he's evaporated to nothing. You can cut him for a running back.
I caught that, pal. Sky Moore evaporated. I got you.
He evaporated to a cloud, yeah. But yeah, I mean, you can probably honestly, Odell Beckham Jr. and Tyler Boyd haven't signed yet. And even if they do, are they really impacting this team at all? Better impact is probably just cut all 3 of those receivers, add 3 more running backs. You've almost doubled the size of your running back room. Getting rid of cloggers that, again, aren't really going to impact your lineup because the top end of this receiver room is so deep. CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle, Zay Flowers, Jaden Reed, Cooper Kupp. I don't even think there's enough starting spots to start all of them. So there's also probably a sell candidate in there, at least one. I mean, CeeDee Lamb would be the ultimate sell candidate right now. Some people consider him the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. I mean, if you can tear off of CeeDee Lamb and get Amon-Ra St. Brown plus anything really, can you go get Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson? Like, is this how you get them and actually get something thrown in on top because CeeDee Lamb's value is there? I'd explore that. I wouldn't tier much further down than Amon-Ra, though. I'd explore those, trading for those other top 3 receivers with Lamb. But other than that, though, I think I'd look to at least try and sell one of Ayuk, Waddle, Flowers, or Reed. These young receivers establishing. Can you go to someone who's, again, maybe these other teams we criticized earlier for being so old at wide receiver? This is the team you need to be shopping with because you can offer them running back depth that really helps this team solidify and maybe even go back to back. I'm sure CeeDee Lamb really helped winning last year, so I could also understand not selling.
Yeah, and real quick, I wanted to address the 25 first and why it wasn't included for the league. So typically the way I do the show sheet or the spreadsheet is I go to Fantasy Pros and use their league analyzer, and it plugs in all your teams and all their assets into the spreadsheet, which these guys then use to do their rankings. Well, Fantasy Pros at this time of year, unfortunately, because they're a redraft site, don't have the league analyzer available to me to do that. So I had to use a different system that does not include the 25 firsts. So they only got access to see your 24 firsts. So there is some good potential there in the 25 first, having 3 first-round picks that could have affected the ranking. So I apologize, Godstrike, but I still think number 3 is a pretty good ranking for you, especially being the defending champion already. So I just wanted to explain that.
I kind of advocate for is if you get to a certain point in the drafts, try and sell picks for future picks because a 24 pick you have to decide, whenever the rookie draft is. Maybe it's a month from now, but you have to make that decision then. I'm picking this player and tying myself to him. Whereas the 25 picks, if you're contending, they're actually more useful for you than current year picks because you can use them, on your route to your fantasy playoffs during the season. When we have more information, you can sell those 25 picks in order to buy production now, whereas you can't really do that with the 24 picks. You have to go and take the rookies. Those rookies aren't always guaranteed to give you production. Yes, there obviously are some. Every year there's rookies that come out and emerge, but a lot of them don't, at least not to the extent where, especially for a team like this, where it's really going to impact your lineup. So having 325 first, even if you don't use them all on picks, but can use them for trade value even in season, if it goes and helps you win a title, it's so worth it.
A perfect example of that is my home league this year. It was about week 8, week 9. I decided, you know what, my team is 2 running backs away from being a true contender, and I sold my 25, my 24 picks because this was during the 23 season. I sold it for Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey, and I rode those two guys to a championship. And that's the perfect example. Is I sold my future, because now I don't have those 2 picks anymore, but I got a nice trophy sitting on my desk right next to me because of that. So perfect example of selling future picks to sort of make that jump into the championship contention. So good call on that, Kyle.
And yeah, Laporta and Kittle. I think that's my tight end 1 and tight end 5 or tight end 6 in Dynasty. So you've got this. I mean, rookies don't ever really produce, let alone be the tight end 1 in points per game in their rookie season. So, if anything, Laporta might be a really good sell because he's the one guy that everyone might want. And you can go to someone who has a McBride or a Kincaid and you can tear down off of Laporta to get them. But short of doing something like that, I think Laporta is a good hold. But if you ever do sell off of him, Kittle's got one of the highest weekly upsides of any tight end. It's just
unfortunately
the floor sucks.
Yeah, the floor is terrible because I own.
You know what though? Most tight ends, the floor isn't very good. So if I'm gonna have to live through that, give me the guy that has some of the most upside from a yak and yards perspective. Travis Kelce a couple years ago had a 4-touchdown game with 29 yards, which is still amazing. It's 4 touchdowns. Like, you can't argue with that. If Kittle ever gets a 4-touchdown game in his career, it's going to be for 200 yards. He's not he'll go 150 and 3. He does that basically at least once a year. So
I think he had that game this past year where he caught 3 passes. All 3 were touchdowns.
It's none of them are like, Mike Evans, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns, 2 yards.
2 yards.
With Tom Brady, right? Like, if Kittle's catching 3 touchdowns, it's usually yards after the catch and he's running into the house from far. But yeah, the problem with Kittle is I don't love having him on a room with Laporta because I feel like I'm never going to play Kittle. And the only way to really capture all his spike weeks is just play him every week and accept the fact that you're going to have bust weeks. And it doesn't feel like he's got that much trade value. He's getting up there in age and all the injuries he's dealt with. Laporta, however, you can get a haul for him. So the roster construction wise, because this is the best tight end room in the league, you might want to keep it like that, but you can also afford to sell off the tight end 1 and still feel like you've got a really high upside tight end. I mean, what are you adding? Like that's where can you go out and get like true elite running backs? Like those young elite running backs, especially.
Yeah.
Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall. I think that would be my first target with Laporta just because of what this team needs so much.
Yeah, agreed. Real quick before we get to the last 2 teams, we got currently 135 people watching. I wanted to plug one more time where you can get the PLP if you want one of these for your league. Goingfor2.com/PLP. We do every kind of league. We do Dynasty. We redraft. We've done Vampire Leagues. We did a 20-team Empire League, which with ridiculously deep rosters. We've done IDP. We've done it all. So if you want one of these, go to goingfor2.com/PLP. It's easy to sign up. Just pick the date you want to. There's a little calendar. Pick the date you want to have it. And you just follow the prompts there. And like I said, if it's in the 12-team league, it's about $8.50 a person, which is pretty cheap. Just add that to your yearly fees. It's not much to add to it, and we get to break down your entire league. So these guys that are in here now, this is their second year doing it, I believe. And they seem to like it. So again, goingfor2.com/PLP. All right, that's enough plugs. Let's get to the number 2 team.
Number 2.
Number 2 team ranked as high as 2, as low as 4, and it is all about TDs. And Shane, this is your squad.
I've been waiting for this one. All about TDs. I want to know what you're drinking. You've been fun in the chat, so let's have some fun with you, shall we? I stand by this from my initial assessment of your team. Your QB room is all about health because I think Aaron Rodgers and Anthony Richardson are your QB 1 and 2. If they stay healthy, your ceiling is championship. If they don't, your ceiling is in trouble. But while I've been sitting here listening to Kyle and Jeff, Chad, I've kind of done some reassessment as I've gone through it. And you actually have some decent depth because I totally forgot that Gardner Minshew was in Vegas. he can compete for that starting job. I think even if they end up bringing in a rookie.
Because
Will
that was funny
Levis-
earlier. You said O'Connell might lose his job. And
I-
part of my thinking was I thought he already did lose his job.
Yeah, I totally forgot that Minshew was there. So I if they don't draft one, I think those two will battle it out. Will Levis, from a fantasy perspective, has the ceiling to throw 4 touchdowns in a game, but also is like, yeah, Will Levis. But your running back room is not my personal favorite. Like, obviously, you've got RB1 in Dynasty and Bijan. But then I've never been a huge Tony Pollard guy. I do think he's getting into a better situation where he will hopefully be used as, I don't want to say complimentary because I think he's better than Spears to a point, but I think they'll be used in a complimentary way. At least that's what I'm hoping for, and that will allow us to see the explosiveness that we've seen from Pollard in the past. Roshan Johnson could be the lead back in Chicago, but they still have Swift, Khalil Herbert. The Bears have basically said F you. And then, Kyle, you said that you had the best wide receiver room in the league, and I
was looking at this one. This could compete with it for sure.
I would like to call you and raise you, sir, because this wide receiver room, holy shit. DK Metcalf, Marquise Brown, Michael Pittman, Nico Collins, Romeo Dobbs, Puka Nakua, Tank Dell. Oh my God. First thing, though, trade Collins or Dell. Whichever one you like better, keep them, trade the other guy.
Or, and Kyle's probably going to say it, or go out and get CJ Stroud.
Also true.
Yeah, because that's so cheap and attainable right now. But yes, that was be my first thought, to be honest.
That would be really difficult to do.
Richardson for Stroud. It's interesting because it's funny if you had made that trade last year, you'd be getting the plus giving up Richardson, but suddenly now how much plus you adding to Richardson to get Stroud. Yeah. That type of upside, though, that might be the type of guy that gets.
But this person does have decent draft capital. Like, they've got 106, 108, 204, 209, 302 is early enough. Like, they could swing it. And then your tight end room, like, you've got Kyle Pitts and Jake Ferguson. And Ferguson, if I remember correctly, finished as a tight end 1. Kyle Pitts is finally out from the evil hands of Arthur Smith. We'll see if he actually gets used. He's actually got a competent quarterback now, too.
That's, I think, the bigger point. He's got a quarterback. Is that he has not had one at all. Like, you can have an offense, like, even great offensive coordinators isn't going to make the quarterback better. So I think even that's
and one that has traditionally
not Desmond Ritter
thrown to tight ends. I mean, he's had Hawkinson, he had Jordan Reed when he was in Washington.
Yep.
He even made Vernon Davis, and Vernon Davis was like 40 years old at that time. He made him a tight end one the year that he was in Washington as well.
Yep. I really like this team. I actually had them the lowest at 4, but after looking through it again, that was probably just because of, like we mentioned earlier in the show, kind of the just the depth of the league. Like, it's hard to rank these teams that they're just so close. Yeah, they're so close.
The 3 teams you had ahead of them, one we haven't talked about yet, and the other 2 we literally just talked about. They were ranked 3 and 4 in the consensus rankings. So especially at this top end, again, mentioned how close teams 2 through 5 were, and that includes teams 1 and 3 in there.
So I like this team. The 2 moves that I would make were try and go get CJ Stroud, and if that doesn't work, go get another running back that's actually a stud.
And again, maybe that's, Dell or Collins is how you get that running back too.
Yeah. Dell or Collins and like a second, I think could get you into another tier of running back.
Yeah.
Do you pair Bijan with Breece Hall or pair Bijan with go get McCaffrey? Just because you have Bijan, you feel like you can afford to take the shot on the older running back that's just going to smash fantasy-wise as long as he's healthy.
Absolutely.
With having Bijan on the team, you feel like, okay, I'll ride out McCaffrey's production until it falls off. And then by that point, Bijan should be ready to emerge as the RB1 unless McCaffrey does this for so long that it outlasts. And then that's an even better problem to have.
Yeah.
So, funny story of this team, when I was putting together the show sheet here, I mentioned that I had to use a different program to copy paste all the teams into the show sheet. This was the first team that I copy pasted on there. I thought it was messing up. I'm like, why is it putting all these quarterbacks? Because they have 7 quarterbacks. I didn't realize that this team actually had 7 quarterbacks. I'm like, why is it only putting quarterbacks? Until I realized that was actually his team. But yeah, I guess the Superflex,
It's the way to do it.
the way
And
to
he
do
said
it.
tried to trade both. They tried to trade both. And I wonder, unfortunately, though, with this Diggs trade, if now the window has kind of closed, like the time to trade them was unfortunately before the trade, you wouldn't have known that there was the reason to want to trade them other than you had both.
I think that window will open again during the season. I think if you
For
can,
sure.
you could time it
Spike
right.
weeks, right? All you wait for one of them to be the wide receiver one on the week, and then so it's maybe a longer term sell. And Jamie joins the chat too. Hey, Jamie.
It's about damn time, Jamie. Where you been?
I'm used to Jamie being in the chat before the show.
I'm guessing he was probably recording since he's doing a lot more of that now. Which is
that is true. It's not our normal night. We usually don't do a show on Friday. He's usually here on Wednesday. So,
Proud of you, Jamie.
all right. Anything else before we get to the final team, guys?
Who is it, folks? Who have we not mentioned yet?
All right, let's get to number 1.
Number one.
All right, the number 1 team ranked as high as 1 and as low as 2. It is Team 330. Kyle, this is your squad.
Best team, worst name. I think we said this last year. Get a better name. Doesn't matter. We still ranked them 1. And I almost didn't do it out of spite. This name again. But then I saw it. CJ Stroud and Joe Burrow. All due respect to Mahomes, Lawrence, this is the best QB duo. Even better than Lamar and Jordan Love. Now, it's Jared Stidham is the QB3, so that's not great. If Dak leaves Dallas, maybe they get another starter in Trey Lance. So it really does feel like QB3 is like one of the only weaknesses on this team. Guess what? They also not only have the best QB duo, they have the best pick duo with the 101 and 102 in the rookie draft. So to me, that's at least 1 quarterback. And suddenly you add Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels to this QB room looks like he could even contend with that Mahomes, Lawrence, Stafford room. Wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, Justin Jefferson. Assuming, we'll see. Maybe not if Sam Darnold's the starter, but assuming they draft a quarterback. And I mean, it's not a deep wide receiver room, but I've also always thought you need high end at wide receiver. Depth isn't all that important because the depth receivers that you're never playing anyway, they're just clogging your roster for no reason. So Justin Jefferson, Drake London, DJ Moore, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. It starts to run thin there, but again, like that's at the very least 3 solid production wide receivers in Jefferson, London, DJ Moore. And this team is so deep at running back right now. Maybe not high end running backs. Some pretty solid guys, though, to where you might still be more flexing more running backs than wide receivers. So being not so deep at wide receiver, I don't think is as bad as, again, I've talked about it, wanting to be deep at running back. And this team does run pretty deep at running back. One of the deeper running back rooms there is, even if argue Ken Walker or David Montgomery are their RBs 1 and 2. But yeah, I think just that combination of Stroud, Burrow, and 101, 102, and Justin Jefferson, like all 5 of those assets, that's like 5 top 15 dynasty assets. That's just kind of all that in together, put it over the top. The one thing I'll say, when I did, again, 2 versions of my rankings, the extreme end stayed the same. The team I had 10, Big Bravs, was 10 in both rankings. Again, I think I just couldn't get by how bad that wide receiver room was. I love Josh Palmer. I hate saying that. This team was number 1 in my rankings, both iterations. And again, I don't think I couldn't look past the QB duo of Stroud and Burrow, the pick duo of 101 and 102. And again, still my wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, and that one of those 101 or 102 could be the receiver 1 rookie, Marvin Harrison Jr. So, yeah, that's a solid roster, top to bottom. It's hard to poke holes. You mentioned the QB3, but it's a solid roster all over. And the fact that they do have that draft capital is pretty insane.
You could go, and you don't even have to draft Caleb or Daniels. Like, this is, you want to go buy someone's quarterback who's kind of dipped in value, and that's how you add a QB3 as well. That can definitely be doable.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Or do you really get frisky and sell like the 102 or maybe the 101 for like a Jared Goff tier, like those top 15 guys, and like get a huge plus over top, and then you still got 102. You can still add another rookie quarterback you wanted, or add to this wide receiver.
I'd be comfortable moving back from 101 or 102 back to like 105.
Well,
And
the team with 104, 105, 107, I wonder if they're perfect trade partners.
well, and because my hot take that I was thinking about is like if you take QB 101, it's a very small tight end premium,
Yeah, 0.25, yeah.
but you could look at Brock Bowers at 102, and I wouldn't hate it for this team.
I'd still go wide receiver. I think
I
0.25
probably would too, but it was just something that crossed my mind is like
I'll be
because
honest, to me, it's not the premiums that would raise Bowers, it's the scarcity. It's the
yeah,
you have to start 2 tight ends. That's where to me Bowers goes up into the
yeah,
to the top echelon. But frankly, like even in 2 tight end premium, I'm still probably going Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors just because I feel so strongly about those prospects.
yeah.
But to your point, Shane, trading back to 105 might be a good spot to take Bowers if you really want.
Yeah, that's kind of what
That's how you maximize the value, and you're still not reaching on that tight end.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm in agreement there with moving back potentially because having the 101 and 102 is nice, but I do like the idea of moving back and getting a couple more picks in there as well.
I mean, the reason it's nice is there's so much flexibility and so many things you can do with them.
Absolutely. Anything you wanted to chime in here, Shane? You had this team at number 2, but I'm just curious to what your thoughts are on this team.
yeah. No, I mean, other than the pick kind of strategy, I think the reason that I probably had them 2 versus 1, like you guys did, was that they don't have that upper echelon running back. You could maybe consider Ken Walker that, or even like a David Montgomery, but that both of those feel kind of gross with the way that Walker was used, and you've got him stacked with Charbonnet. And that's probably it. Like wide receiver room is solid up at the top, and then you've got JSN that's kind of sitting down there waiting in the depths to emerge. But yeah, it was really close for me.
All right, guys, let's do some dark horse picks here. And Kyle, I'll go to you first here. Give me your dark horse guy that you think could surprise some people this year.
I mean, we nailed the dark horse picks last year. We didn't nail the rankings that well, and typically we're picking the dark horse teams from the lower ranked teams. So I guess that makes sense why we nailed all the dark horse picks. To me, like the one team that stands out is again dark horse based on our consensus rankings would be Dave Katz, just because I had them at 4, and yet the you guys had them 8 and 9 respectively. So I guess in your eyes it could be dark horse, especially this running back room. This is one where there's not an obvious player. Again, if Mostert gets a bunch of touchdowns like last year, that would be great. I don't know if that's going to happen, but just Javonte Williams rebound. Does Nick Chubb make a miraculous healthy recovery? I think this team, if it gets that elite running back somewhere, and maybe that's through a trade, then I think it really puts them over the top, and they've got the ammunition. Again, 3 first-round picks. Apparently someone has 3 first-rounders next year, but no one else has 3 first-rounders in this year's draft. Again, 2 of them are in that top half where it's really key. And again, back to the 101, 102, this team having all that flexibility, I think, can really help elevate this team higher than what like the roster composition looks like right now. And I guess that's why I view them as a dark horse.
Fair enough. What about you, Shane? What you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you 2. One is just like straight dark horse. I think TK Wood has a really solid roster that can emerge, and we had them ranked consensus 6th. With you and Kyle both at 6 and me at 7. I think they could, with their QB room and what the potential of their older running back room is for this year, could emerge as a contender. And then like a super, super dark horse, just to give them a little love, the first team we talked about, because they are kind of a glorified redraft team because of how fucking old they are. Sick Puppy could be that super dark horse team that competes this year and then just dies because they're so old.
Yeah, that was going to be my dark horse too, is Sick Puppy, because like you mentioned, it's a redraft squad. It's an older squad. You know, if he doesn't tear it down this year and try to rebuild with draft picks, if he decides, you know what, screw it, I'm going to go try to win the championship. He has the potential to do that with some of those players. If they all, you know, if the cards fall right, he makes a couple of smart trades here and there. I think he could be the consensus ranked 10th team next year, being the champion. So that's definitely a possibility. So he is also my dark horse as well.
And All About TDs will be happy they're the dark horse and also ranked number 2 in the rankings because Jamie decreed them as the dark horse because they have Roshan.
Because they have their Roshan. Yeah, Jamie's the
Of
Roshan.
course.
Even though all of us think this is a pretty good team and they're going to do well. But
Yeah.
All right, fellas, that wraps the podcast up. We'll go around the horn here really quick. Shane, I want to go to you first because we just did this PLP, and I donated a PLP to your charity league, and I want you to talk about that a little bit, and maybe these guys would want to sign up for that.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so I run a charity tournament every year called Polly's Playoff. We're going into year 5, and I'm trying to make year 5 the best year. So we're going to have more prizes than we've had ever. One of those is you guys can actually win a PLP from Jeff for free if you win Polly's Playoff. So signups will be open NFL draft weekend at pollysplayoff.com. I am reducing the minimum donation to $1, but our average donation last year was about $25. So just to kind of put some perspective in there, and all of the donations are straight to the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association has affected my family personally, and also affects about 60% of the fantasy football community. So just trying to build kind of an advocacy for that and grow awareness for that disease and hopefully help find a cure. So follow me on Twitter at FFShaneB for that announcement, and there will be someone else to follow soon.
All right, good stuff. Kyle, what you got going on, man?
And I'm trying to find where Sick Puppies First is. I don't even know. It's like it disappeared. It didn't ever existed. All right, that's not as important. Just because I'm curious to where they finished mostly. Saying because John, who just I guess first commented the night from John, so thank you for commenting. Just mentioned that Sick Puppy apparently smoked the league last year. Yeah, and glorified redraft team, though it does make sense, but I think we're all concerned the cliff falling off. When does that happen? But there's no fall off at the Going for Two Live network. There's great shows every night of the week. There's no downtime. Dynasty's always strong. Okay, they're the 1-9. So they lost in the final. Okay.
Mancino's
not lying about the Going for Two. It's amazing. I'm sure that's not what that's about. But yes, so just coming up, Jeff mentioned earlier, I've got press coverage as one of the shows I host. We've got our April episode. It's my April episode. I'm the only host. Coming up on Monday, April 15th. Andrew Erickson from Fantasy Prones.
Nice.
Joined me.
Great guest.
When I met at the Fantasy Football Expo a few years ago, had some great conversations with him there, and I'm looking forward to continuing the talk with Andrew again on Monday. I also, outside of Going for Two Live, I have the Full Press Fantasy Pod and the Full Press Packers Pod. The Fantasy Pod, I'd say it's once a week, but even now with rookies coming in so much to do, I'll probably cram in a second episode this week. But actually, Jamie also shouting out the free Going for Two Discord, great for that. But Jamie also joined me on the Full Press Fantasy Pod on this recent episode this week. We were talking about rookie tight ends. The rookie QB episode is out as well. Rookie running back will be next. And another Going for Two Live family member, Ryan Searfoss, will join me on Tuesday to talk rookie wide receivers.
Good stuff.
If anyone who loves fantasy, especially Dynasty this time of year, Full Press Fantasy, we do a lot of great stuff there. Full Press Packers, we're still preparing for the draft too. We did offensive prospects that we think would fit the Packers on the last episode. We'll do defense on the next episode. In case there's any IDP people out there, just crazy Packers fans like me. But yes, appreciate this, again, extraordinary experience with the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen PLP.
Good stuff. All right, so Jamie did the favor for me and plugged the Discord. If you're on Discord and you want to jump into it, it's free. You got access to all of these guys, even though Shane is not much of a Discord guy, but
I'm getting there.
He's getting better. I've taught him a couple things, but you got access to all these guys, plus a bunch of other, we call them fantasy coaches, guys that are verified content creators for fantasy. I even have a tag set up that you can tag, fantasy coach and ask your question, and somebody will answer your question.
Blows my fucking phone up.
So, that is the hope that at least one or two of our experts will be able to answer your question whenever you tag us. We also have betting stuff in there as well too. So we do our daily picks, but it's all free. You just find it on my Twitter account. The link is in the Twitter bio. So just join there. And I also wanted to plug in 2 weeks our NFL draft coverage. We go live for 99% of the draft. I don't think we finish off the full Saturday draft.
See, I think Brian Ford did last year. Like I got off and he was still going strong hours later. So I think actually might have succeeded doing it last year. All thanks to Brian Ford.
So if you want to
That's
watch
right.
the NFL draft and have a fantasy spin, tune into us. We'll be here all 3 nights. We divide it up so different different hosts will take different parts of the show. So we kind of keep it unique and interesting as they're going on. You're not getting the same thing over and over and over again. So check that out. It'll be on the YouTube page. We'll be live for the entire NFL draft. Jump in the chat. We try to, as be interactive as possible. It's a more relaxed show. It's not as much structure. We're just kind of talking about the picks and what it means for fantasy and that kind of stuff. So hope to see y'all there. All right. Thanks again once again, guys, for purchasing the PLP, and we hope to see y'all again next year and see how our ranks did. I know the guys kept track of what our rankings were last year, so you can tell us how we did next year when we do this again. So appreciate your purchase, guys, and for anybody out there that might want one of these, goingfor2.com/PLP is where you can get it. For Shane, for Kyle, I'm Jeff. We will see y'all next year, hopefully.
Going for 2 live.